All right, welcome back to another episode of Yoga Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Waycott. On today's episode of the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about the mindset that goes into stepping out on your own as an independent yoga teacher. And I want to preface this episode before I get into talking about mindset by saying that I don't want to suggest that mindset is the only factor that goes into building a successful career as an independent yoga teacher. I want to acknowledge that our opportunities are often influenced by social factors, certain privileges, support networks, the energy that we have available, and so many other things. And I never want to fall into kind of that category of just saying like, mindset is everything and all you need to do is change the way that you think to, accomplish things, because that is really not true. And that's one of the parts of like the wellness industry as a whole that I really don't agree with. And I don't feel like I kind of see eye to eye with a lot of folks on that. There are so many other factors that influence our success. And for the sake of today's episode, I really want to just say that mindset can be an interesting lens to look at things through. And that's the lens that I want to take a look at today. But mindset is not everything, okay? It's just like one piece of the puzzle. So with that being said, I want to define what I mean by being an independent yoga teacher. So from my perspective, if you are an independent yoga teacher, you are typically not a contractor or an employee at a studio, a gym, a franchise, and instead you are the one creating and marketing all of your own offerings in your own name for the most part. And it doesn't mean that you're not collaborative. It doesn't mean that you don't, engage in collaborations from time to time or that you're not out there building community. It just means that you really are like the face of your own business, and most of the work that you're putting out there into the world is in your own name. Now, this can include everything from like yoga teacher trainings to the weekly classes that you offer to workshops and retreats. And everything that you do, for the most part, is really like made in your own vision. And I've been an independent yoga teacher for quite a few years, and I want to give you just like a little bit of a background on how I got there, because it wasn't like a straight line in terms of the process. And it wasn't even necessarily intentional, like especially in the beginning of my teaching career. So just for background, I've been a yoga teacher for my entire adult life. And when I started teaching yoga, I taught yoga pretty much everywhere. So drop-in classes in gyms and studios. I taught at my local university. I was teaching in community halls. I was working with older adults, professional athletes, running classes for nonprofit organizations, sports teams, private events. Like, I was literally doing everything. And a lot of that was in the name of building experience. Like, I was quite open to opportunities as they showed up. And I wanted to teach and I wanted to, refine my teaching skills. So I really taught in a lot of different environments. Like, there was a lot of diversity in terms of the places where I taught. And despite being young and motivated and passionate about sharing yoga with my community, I inevitably hit that wall that so many yoga teachers do, because I was just teaching too many drop-in classes, and I knew that I needed to make a change. And this is where things began to shift more consciously in the direction of eventually becoming what I would consider an independent yoga teacher. So I needed to create a business model for myself that paid me better than what I was being paid, and something that was sustainable where I wasn't going to burn myself out and feel exhausted all the time because I was just at the mercy of other people's schedules. And so in the beginning, it did look like creating more opportunities for myself where I could have more control over the work that I was doing. And I've mentioned this in a previous episode that I started teaching more private lessons. So I was going and teaching in people's homes, working with some private clients that were referred to me by a physiotherapy clinic. And that was great because private sessions, as you know, typically pay much better than drop-in sessions. I also started kind of playing around with community events, hosting my own community events in collaboration with other yoga, or not yoga businesses, but local businesses rather. And again, that was another way to kind of branch out on my own and also put myself in front of like an audience and like in front of my community in a new way where it wasn't just like, oh, she's a teacher at that studio. It was like, oh, this is Alex, the yoga teacher. And I was kind of able to get in front of more people. And then eventually that evolved into me creating my own yoga workshops and running more educational workshops. It evolved into pre-registered yoga classes. It turned into continuing education programs and eventually 200-hour yoga teacher trainings and retreats. And that shift happened slowly over the course of, multiple years. And like it wasn't a straight path, but eventually I did phase out all of my drop-in classes altogether to the point where I am today, where all of my offerings are just exclusively run through me. And when I started out, like when I went full-time as a yoga teacher and started kind of branching into doing things independently, like I did not have a big following on social media. I had like 15 people on my email newsletter list. It's not that I was, super well connected or anything like that. Like I really started small and grew very gradually over a long period of time. But what I want to kind of walk through today are some of the mindset shifts or just kind of things that we can think about in terms of our mentality towards being independent as a yoga teacher. And some of the qualities that we might think about cultivating in order to help with that process. Because, not everybody wants to be an independent yoga teacher, but it can be very rewarding. It can be very creative. And for me, it's just been a wonderful experience. It's the best thing I could have ever done in my yoga business is go independent. So that's the goal of today's episode, is to cover just a couple of sort of the key mindsets that I think are really important to do this work. The first quality that I think you need to cultivate, or mindset that you need to get into, is the energy of initiation and being willing to start things. So in order to go independent as a yoga teacher and start to create your own offerings, you have to be willing to start things without permission and without being invited. And I think that can feel super scary and super uncomfortable for a lot of us. And that's something that I can totally relate to, because every time as an independent yoga teacher that I kind of have stepped out to do something new, I always feel like that inner critic and that voice in my head gets a little bit louder, and it starts to say like, who does she think she is? And like, why is she out there trying to do that? And it can be like a real psychological challenge to just like put yourself out there and put something out into the world that you care about and that means a lot to you, and not exactly know how it's going to be received. But I have realized that like, you're not always going to get invitations to go do things. So for example, if you have an idea like, oh, I really want to run a workshop on this certain subject, like you might have to just start running that workshop that you feel like running. And like, maybe the invitations to travel or run your workshop in other locations, like maybe they'll come at a later time, but to get started, you really have to be the initiator, and you really have to believe in yourself and your vision and what you have to offer. And I would say that that's one of the biggest things, and that's such a challenge really to do that and to put yourself out there, to trust your own authority, to trust your inner knowing, and decide what you want to teach and how you're going to make that happen. And I always think back to the first like continuing education training that I ever ran. So it wasn't a 200-hour training. It was just a short weekend training, specifically on sequencing and like teaching vinyasa yoga. And I can't even remember if it was like a 2-day training or a 3-day training. And I had the vision for this training, and I was really feeling like I wanted to offer it to my community. I had already been teaching some educational workshops, and those were just maybe like 2 hours, 3 hours at a time. I was getting to the point in my teaching career where, newer teachers were starting to come to me, and they were asking me questions about how to do things, or people were coming to my class and like observing and taking notes, like, based off of what I was doing. And I think like in the back of my mind, that kind of told me like, okay, like maybe you are ready to teach other teachers, but nobody had necessarily invited me to do it or given me permission to do it. I really just had to decide for myself, like, okay, I'm going to start running continuing education programs for other teachers because I think I have something to share. And I remember just putting like so much thought and so much planning into this like 2 or 3 day training that I was offering. And, I planned it all out, and I created like the manual for it and all the teaching materials and like marketed it. And it was like this big process that went into something that was really not such a big training, but at the time it felt like it was something really big. And part of it was because, I taught maybe for 2 or 3 hours at a time, but I'd never taught for like a full day where I was in charge of the classroom and I'm teaching for 8 or 9 hours. And not only do I have my own curriculum to deliver, but I also have certain learning outcomes that I'm hoping the people in the training will meet. And to me, that felt like a lot of pressure. And, I marketed the training, and thankfully, there were a handful of people out there who were interested and believed in me and signed up. And it was kind of like I had to just go out and do it in order to prove to myself that I could. And thankfully, it went well. And I feel like that was a real catalyst for me into being able to continue to run those types of smaller trainings and eventually kind of developing the confidence to put together like my own 200-hour training. Yeah. And, I just feel like if I hadn't have taken action, even when I didn't know exactly what the outcome was going to look like, I don't think that I would be where I am today. So for me, that energy of initiation and just being willing to like do things and start things, even if nobody else like sees your vision, I think is something that is going to be really, really helpful for those of you who are wanting to go out and like do more things on your own and do more things in your name. If you have like a little inkling or a little feeling inside of you that there's something, that you have to offer, that you really feel called to share it with people, I really think that you should follow it and like, don't overthink it too much. Don't try to talk yourself out of it. Don't listen to that little voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough or you're not smart enough or you don't know enough. Like, you really have to just like push past those things in order to grow. And yeah, that's just like one of my biggest sort of mindset offerings that I want to share with you is like, take action, connect to that feeling of initiation, and don't be afraid to start things for yourself. I really believe if you want to succeed as an independent yoga teacher, you have to learn how to tap into that energy. Even if it doesn't come naturally to you at first, I think it gets easier over time. And you just have to trust yourself enough to start and keep going and, continue following your vision. The second sort of mindset or like energy that I want to offer is connecting to determination and consistency. And I put these two qualities together because I feel like they go hand in hand and you can't really have one without the other. So, being an independent yoga teacher is not easy. There is a lot of extra work that has to be done in the back end. You have to be quite self-motivated, and I think that applies to any type of self-employment, any kind of like entrepreneurship. Like, you're the one who has to get things done at the end of the day, and like nobody else is going to make you do it. If things don't work out, like usually there's nobody else to blame, and it can be quite confronting. So I think, determination and consistency are the ability to keep showing up even when things are unclear, even if you don't know exactly like how you're going to move towards your goal or your specific vision. And it's that willingness to keep moving forward, even if you don't fully see the path in front of you. Not even the outcome, but like that path to get to the outcome. And that is where determination and consistency really come in. I think that this is like the least glamorous part of being an independent yoga teacher, because being determined and being consistent also means showing up maybe when you're tired, when you're not feeling 100%, when things aren't going as well as you want them to be going, or when things in your business are growing like really slowly and not as fast as, you want them to, or maybe like it feels like other people aren't quite as excited about what you're putting out there as you are. Like, it is that ability to just keep going, even, when things are a little bit murky or unclear. And it also means that, you're trusting that the effort that you're putting in now is going to build something eventually, even if it takes longer than you thought. And one of the times when I feel like I really had to connect to this was during the beginning of the pandemic. So at that time, I was actually enrolled in an in-person 300-hour yoga teacher training in Vancouver. And partway through the yoga teacher training, essentially like the world shut down where I was living in Canada, at least. And, the training was paused and everybody was sent home, and there was, a lot of uncertainty. I was teaching yoga full time at that time. And it was mostly drop-in classes, private sessions, a couple of sports teams, and like events on the weekends and stuff like that. It was kind of a mix. I was definitely going in the direction of becoming more of an independent yoga teacher. And I remember losing all of my work in a matter of just a couple of days. And it really felt like a big rupture. It was like, if you've ever been there, like you work hard to get all these classes and all these different opportunities and to maintain them and maintain good relationships. And, to have everything just disappear overnight and then also like, not know where your income is going to come from. It was a really challenging time for a lot of people. And I just remember when that happened, feeling like I didn't want to give up on teaching yoga. And, I saw within my own community that there was also this big sense of loss amongst the students who had lost some of those really important kind of like third spaces, if you will, right? Like yoga studios, gathering places where normally they would go to practice and connect with their community. Like suddenly that was gone. And for the yoga teachers as well, like our livelihood, was temporarily not available to us. And just kind of the months prior to all this happening, I had actually been filming like yoga videos, behind the scenes with the intention of maybe creating like a YouTube channel or an online platform. I was just experimenting. And so I had these like online yoga practices that I'd already been creating. And what I ended up doing was creating an online platform that was my own because I was really, really determined to stay connected with the yoga students that I had been teaching, every week for years at this point. And I wanted to keep offering them something and maintain that relationship with those students. And so I created this online platform and I started putting up on-demand yoga practices every week. And there was like tiered memberships on the platform. So you could sign up and just do the on-demand practices. You could sign up and get a certain amount of like Zoom private lessons with me. And you could also sign up and do like on-demand classes, Zoom private lessons, and like group Zoom classes as well. So I was like really, really invested in what I was doing. But as you know, if you've had your own online like subscription platform, or if you've worked for like a yoga app or anything like that, you need to have a lot of volume in terms of subscriptions to create like any kind of reasonable revenue. So you need a lot of people to sign up. And I just remember that it was challenging because, creating videos is a lot of work. And every week I was like filming videos and then going into the studio and doing voiceovers for the videos and editing things, putting them together. Thankfully, I had Kyler helping me. And, doing all this work, and sometimes it was like, oh, there was just a handful of people, signed up on the online platform. And even if you get subscribers, they kind of come and go and, they sign up and then maybe they leave after a week. And I just remember it was really, really slow to build. And there was also a lot of other online platforms at that time, and everybody was going online. And I think that my consistency in terms of like putting out content every single week, even when it was challenging and it felt like the world was on fire, and kind of seeing the bigger vision that even if this didn't grow into something huge, there was still value in showing up for my students during a difficult time, maintaining those connections with my community in the way that was available to us at the time, was really valuable, like in the long term and in the big picture. Because then when we were able to go back to in-person classes and in-person teaching, a lot of the people who had been on my online platform who were local to me were able to kind of shift over and join in on my pre-registered yoga classes. And I still teach tons of those students that I was working with during the pandemic virtually. I still teach a lot of them every single week in my classes. And so I think that that's really, really cool, because that was a time where, I totally could have given up on teaching yoga, and, stopped what I was doing and allowed myself to feel defeated. But I just didn't, because it was just so important to me to keep showing up. So really kind of cultivating those qualities in yourself and knowing that your efforts are part of something bigger can help you keep going, especially when you encounter those inevitable challenges that do come with being an independent yoga teacher. Because it's so rewarding, but it's also not always the easiest thing. And the final quality that I want to offer today is clarity. So, getting into the mindset of being really clear about what you do and why you do it is going to be really important for you as an independent yoga teacher. You need to know what you're offering, and you need to know why you're doing what you do. Like, what is your unique perspective on things? What do you believe in? And it means being clear in your messaging. It means being clear in how you structure your classes, your workshops, your offerings, your retreats. Clarity in terms of your professional boundaries, your pricing, like all of it. And I truly believe that our ability to get clear is rooted in our values as yoga teachers. And our values reveal themselves to us more fully with time and with experience actually teaching. And so I think that's why, when we are new yoga teachers, it's actually really important to just get out there and start teaching, even if it looks like you're doing a bunch of different things and teaching in lots of different places, and like you don't have a quote unquote niche. Like, that's totally okay. But just by getting out there, like into the community and starting teaching, I think that is really going to help you get more clear on what is important to you. And, when I started teaching yoga at like a really young age, I was basically still a teenager. Like, I was still developing as a person, as a human, as an adult. And I was figuring out who I was and what I stood for. And, I think it took a while for my values as a yoga teacher to really become clear and kind of like come up to the surface, if you will. But as time went on, it was a lot easier to get clear on what was important to me. And, like as those values became more defined, it was also easier for me to sense when there was misalignment in certain teaching spaces. So, maybe I was leading classes in environments that just didn't feel like the right fit for me. Or, maybe I was leading events that didn't really reflect like the reverence and the respect that I have for the practice of yoga. And that clarity and just like getting in touch with my own values as a yoga teacher really allowed me also to like step away from certain things that weren't a great fit for me anymore. And they also allowed me to move in the direction of pursuing what was important to me and what was a good fit. So clarity, getting clear on what you do, why you do it, and what your values are is really, really important as an independent yoga teacher, because that is going to like define the foundation that you stand on, the foundation of your business and the work that you do. So, if you're thinking about going independent, a big part of this is cultivating the qualities or the mindset that is going to allow you to lead and take action. And if you're listening to this, I would reflect on, what qualities or mindsets do you feel like come naturally to you? So do you feel like it's easy to go out and initiate things and start things, or are you someone who kind of holds back when it comes to that? And it also, like, what qualities do you want to strengthen in yourself? Like, what do you want to work on? But yeah, if you're willing to initiate, if you're willing to kind of stay the course, even when it's challenging, and you're willing to get really, really clear on what you do and why you do it, this can definitely be a really powerful path and a wonderful way to share yoga with the world. And yeah, I'm so glad that, I've been able to pursue teaching yoga independently, especially in the last few years. It's allowed me to really step into my own as a leader in my community. It has allowed me more creativity in my work. And I feel like at the end of the day, I'm able to provide like a deeper service for the people that I work with, because everything I do is coming authentically from me. So to wrap things up, if you really want to be an independent yoga teacher, you do need to be in a certain mindset to make things happen. But your mindset is just like one small piece of the puzzle. So I think I'm going to come back to this particular subject and kind of dive into some other aspects of it in future episodes, because this is something that I really enjoy thinking about and sharing with other yoga teachers. And yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Yoga Insider. If you've been listening to the podcast and you haven't taken the time to leave a review wherever you're listening, please go ahead and leave a 5-star rating for Yoga Insider. It's super, super helpful for the algorithm so that this podcast gets put in front of more yoga teachers around the world who might be interested in sharing these types of conversations. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time.